Dry with plenty of sunny spells, though a few showers are possible across northern England, Wales, the Midlands in particular. Temperatures ranging from the low to mid-20s, highs of 26 or 27 towards the London area, so feeling warm in that sunshine. Showers through Friday evening continue for a time, but they should ease across England and Wales. However, across Northern Ireland and Scotland, we'll see weather systems move in here, bringing outbreaks of rain. Some of this could be heavy at times during the early hours, some stronger winds developing here too. But elsewhere, the dry weather holding on, and a mild night once again, temperatures 16, 17 degrees for many of us. Which means a warm start to Saturday morning. Best of the sunshine first thing across southeast England, wet across Scotland, Northern Ireland. This pushing its way southeastwards, so becoming cloudy across Wales, southwest England with some patchy rain too. But it should generally stay dry across the far southeast. The rain continues to push in through the weekend, so all of us should see some rain at some point, but temperatures staying on the warm side, highs of 26 or 27.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as the NHS shuts down the controversial Tavistock gender identity clinic after a bombshell report concluded it was, quote, not safe and failed vulnerable young people such as the detransitional whistleblower, Cara Bell.
I'm on the sidelines just like them, really, just waiting for the bigger changes to happen to the point where kids aren't being harmed anymore.
So is this a watershed moment in ensuring gender dysphoric children are protected from experimental treatments? Women's rights activist and executive director of Sex Matters, Maya Forstater, she's an ally of J.K. Rowling, and Richie Heron, who's suing the NHS over trans surgery he regrets. They both join me on this at 9:45. As a top Tory donor claims the UK will be seen as racist for failing to elect its first ethnic minority Prime Minister, have Rishi Sunak's allies reached new levels of desperation by playing the race card? I'll break down why the former Chancellor's imploding campaign has nothing to do with race and everything to do with betraying Conservative values in my digest next. Then I'll get the thoughts of my superstar panel. Top Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. Sunak and Liz Truss faced their first leadership hustings just an hour ago, really, amid calls by the Green Party to make tougher climate commitments. But should the next PM learn from Boris Johnson's miscalculation and avoid pushing an extreme eco agenda? We'll debate at 10. Plus, would the Channel migrant crisis get worse under a Sunak premiership? Political firebrand Anne Widdecombe gives her damning verdict at 9:35. Is the official COVID inquiry asking the wrong questions about our pandemic response? Professor Snitra Gupta, co-author of the Great Barrington Declaration, is demanding to know why the efficacy of lockdowns is off the table. She's here at 10:20. And do we need to cleanse the country of COVID propaganda? Social media sensation Zuby says Brits need to speak up now. He's uncancelled on this at 10:40. And was it wrong for an art trust to use taxpayer money to fund anti-straight white man posters? Well, I've got a blockbuster lineup for this clash tonight. Political YouTuber Maya Tusi, Corrie actor and voice of the people Charlie Lawson, human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, broadcaster Narinder Kaur, and entrepreneur and former apprentice star Joanna Jarju, who are all going to battle it out at 9:25. Plus, Labour are well and truly spiralling over Starmer's strike stance, with the hard left of the party, led by that socialist little pipsqueak Owen Jones, baying for blood.
Keir Starmer is a professional political conman.
We'll take a closer look at that and more of the day's top headlines in the media buzz at 10:30. Tomorrow's newspaper front page is on the way too. Plus, I'm going to wipe the floor with these vegan extremists who poured milk all over Harrods and a load of Waitrose stores too, as I crown my final greatest Briton and Union jackass of the week. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first. So the first hustings between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have just wrapped up in Leeds tonight. And in the opening statements, Sunak, well, he was greeted with stony silence from the Tory members, while Truss delivered a barnstorming statement of intent peppered with red meat declarations like this.
But as well as freedom and democracy abroad, we also need it at home. And I know we've got an audience full of straight-talking Yorkshire people who know that a woman is a woman. And people who believe in free speech.
Wasn't such an easy night for Fishy Rishi, though, who was grilled by the brilliant Nick Ferrari. Watch.
Performed an extraordinary U-turn over your decision with VAT on energy bills. Last week it was unconservative. Now it's a policy. Are you flipping and flopping?
Oh, gosh, no, definitely not.
Last question on Boris Johnson, I assure you. It's reported around 14,000 members of the Conservative Party want his name back on the ballot. What would you say to them?
Well, I'd say to them that I think close to 60 people resigned in Parliament. And it's incumbent on the Prime Minister to have the confidence of the parliamentary party. And that wasn't there at the end. So whether he's on the ballot or not, ultimately you need to be able to command the confidence of your MPs in Parliament. And we got to a point where close to 60 of them had resigned from government.
So why are Rishi supporters blaming his current thrashing on race? I'll hit back in my digest shortly then. My superstar panel weigh in. Welcome back to top Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, the political commentator Dominique Samuels, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. But before all of that, the news headlines at 9 with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. Conservative leadership candidates Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are still going head-to-head in a hustings in Leeds. It's the first of 12 Tory hustings. Asked about inheritance tax, Liz Truss said people who work hard should be able to pass on their earnings to their children. Rishi Sunak said he wanted to get a grip on immigration as quickly as possible, saying the process should be legal, orderly and controlled. Both candidates setting out their vision for the country, and Liz Truss now currently taking questions from party members. More details on how that goes throughout Dan's programme and indeed our bulletins tonight. Now, in other news today, the parents of 12-year-old Archie Battersby have failed to persuade the Supreme Court to stop doctors from ending his life support treatment. They had asked justices to give them more time to carry on their fight for their son, but the request was refused. Doctors say Archie is now clinically brain dead after he went into a coma in April. His mother says she thinks he was attempting an online challenge when he had a life-changing accident. A man has been jailed in the first ever televised hearing inside a criminal court in England and Wales today. Judge Sarah Munro QC's comments were streamed live from the Old Bailey in London this morning. She made legal history as she handed Ben Oliver a life sentence for killing his grandfather. Unions have today announced further rail strikes for this Saturday and then once again on August the 13th in a dispute over pay. As Lev says, train drivers at 9 companies are set to walk out. It said strikes are a last resort until pay is in line with inflation. That's after passengers faced another day of disruption today due to yesterday's strikes. And workers at Britain's biggest and busiest container port have voted as well to strike in a dispute over pay. Members of the Unite Union backed industrial action at Felixstowe in Suffolk by 9 votes to 1. The union saying an offer of a 5% pay rise is in fact an effective wage cut for them because of the soaring rate of inflation. And the actor Bernard Cribbins has died at the age of 93. Famous for narrating children's television series The Wombles and starring in the film The Railway Children, as well as Doctor Who and the Carry On films, his career spans 7 decades. Dame Floella Benjamin tweeted, "He was a creative genius, a great storyteller and knew just how to communicate with an audience." Bernard Cribbins, who died today at the age of 93. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Dan Wootton Tonight.
It was only a matter of time, wasn't it, in a Conservative Party leadership race that has been praised internationally for its overwhelming diversity, a seeming rejection of the stale and male politicians who dominate the Labour leadership. It was still only a matter of time, though, before Team Rishi Sunak blamed his imploding campaign on racism. Forget the fact that Kemi Badenoch was a surprise favourite among the party membership before being booted by MPs for being too daring and different. Forget the fact that Liz Truss is a woman who went to a Leeds comprehensive. No, Sunak's failure is nothing to do with his big state high tax agenda, which saw him increase our tax burden to the highest it's been in 70 years. Nothing to do with his globalist posturing and desire to cozy up to China by making the communist country our market of choice, as revealed in bombshell leaked Treasury documents reported in The Times today. No, nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with the fact he backstabbed Boris Johnson, the man to whom he owes his career, plotting his leadership campaign, all while pretending to be his loyal chancellor. No, it's down to racism. Conservative donor and fishy Rishi supporter Lord Ranger told Indian news network Bharat Tag, if people reject him, it will be a bad name for the party in the country because this will be perceived as racist. And so there is pressure on them to prove that here race does not matter. Calibre matters. And Rishi's calibre is above everyone. I am optimistic that people here will be fair and will not reject anyone on the basis of race. Lord Ranger, I can assure you the Conservative members are not rejecting Rishi based on race. They're rejecting him based on policies and a lack of loyalty too. He's added to his comments today in this Twitter video.
It will be a watershed moment in British politics when a non-white candidate will prove that this country is ready for a change. And I can assure you, Rishi will have to work harder than anyone else because he has to prove that he's just as good, if not better.
But as my colleague and friend Calvin Robinson tweeted in response, vote for me because I am brown is bad enough. If you don't, you're a racist is even worse. This divisive, toxic rhetoric is straight from the leftist guidebook on critical race theory and should have no place in the Conservative Party or the government of this great nation. The Sunday Telegraph's editor Alistair Heath, once a major fan of Sunak, summed up the mood of the party best when he described him today of becoming the Tory that the anti-Tories on Twitter love to support, a new Heseltine, Clark, Hunt or Davidson, but who party members reject. And on Liz Truss, he wrote in today's Daily Telegraph, a former Liberal Democrat and ex-Remainer, she has the zeal of a convert. Her intellectual journey counts in her favour in the new Tory party. She has captured the membership's mood. Her decision last year to oppose in Cabinet the calamitous historic blunder that is the 2.5-point national insurance increase was both right in principle and politically brilliant. So I repeat, this current thrashing has nothing to do with race, but everything to do with what it truly means to be Conservative. To respond now, my superstar panel. Star Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, the political commentator Dominique Samuels and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. I mean, Sarah, look, we saw in those hustings earlier tonight, the Tory members are just not engaging with what Rishi is giving.
I think Rishi's problem is that he is very associated with the regime that has just fallen, and yet I don't think he backstabbed Boris. He stabbed him very much in the front. I mean, I don't think he was duplicitous particularly.
Well, he set up that website ready for Rishi in December.
Yes, but I mean, Liz Truss has been planning her campaign probably for much longer than that. I mean, anyone who's seen it...
You just think that's politics?
That's just politics. I don't think that's particularly Rishi.
But the members...
Also, Ready for Rishi is such a terrible slogan. I don't think it's done him any good, has it? Let's be honest. It's like phones for you. But anyway, I think what they don't like is his entitlement. I think there's a little bit of whiff of entitlement about Rishi. It's, I'm a clever guy, I did well as Chancellor, this should be my prize. This is the problem that Gordon Brown had, this is the problem that George Osborne would have had. This is the problem with being Chancellor, is that you're always the heir apparent. And then when the Prime Minister goes and you go, OK, it's my turn now, everyone goes, well, I'm sorry, I'm not sure it is your turn because, you're partly the architect of all this mess and actually no, and you can't just expect to be crowned.
It's nothing to do with his race.
And it's nothing to do with his race at all. I mean, the Tory party, I think, is incredibly diverse, actually, especially if you compare it to the Labour Party, who are supposed to be the right-on lot. I mean, we've had women, we've had Rishi, for example, as an Asian Chancellor.
Well, I think Kemi would have won if she got to the
We've had Sajid. I mean,
two things can be true at the same time. So you can say, not much of the downfall of Rishi has been to do with his race, but there is still some racism at play within his campaign. That if you type in...
Where? What?
If you look on Twitter, every time he speaks, people will say racist comments. There's been a big question over his Hindu faith. I think similarly, you can say Liz Truss it didn't get elected because of sexism, but then sexism does exist within the Tory party. Similarly, Kemi Badenoch, you could say, it wasn't because of race, but then that racism is still a part to play.
I mean, I think
it's just a piece of the puzzle.
I think with
you can't eliminate it
with the
entirely.
Tories in particular, there are a lot of Asian Tories in the world. Yeah. I mean, the membership is quite. I've been to lots of membership.
More likely to actually
I mean, Dominique, this guy is Chancellor. He received the top backing from MPs. Yeah. And the reason, Dominique, Tory party members are not engaging with this guy is, I can promise you, nothing to do with his race. It's to do with the fact that he's pursuing this high-tax agenda.
I think what Lord Ranger said was, like Calvin said, it's right out of the leftist playbook of trying to emotionally blackmail people into doing what you want them to do by using something that nobody wants to be, which is racist, against them. And the fact of the matter is, when we saw all of the people that put themselves forward for leader, I think it was one of the most diverse lineups we've ever seen in politics, right or left of the political spectrum. And I was really pleasantly surprised by that. And the reason why it doesn't stack up is, like you said, Kemi Badenoch, she was extremely popular, and I think she would have won whoever she was up against, whether it was Liz Truss or not. So the idea that it's racist, again, it's emotional manipulation. The reason why people aren't feeling Rishi at the moment isn't because he's Asian, but because of the policies that he's presided over, for example, the national insurance rise, and because he is perceived as a backstabber, and that's
But I think this is just pointing out that it's not a level playing field. So the fact that Kemi is black will have played down. The fact that Liz is a woman has played down. It's not a level playing field.
How do you know it's played out?
Because you can see that.
I mean, I would say, Amy, the people who really struggled in the race with the straight white
males,
Tom Tugendhat
yeah.
and Jeremy Hunt and Grant Shapps.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, seriously, where is your evidence?
I think that's a really naive take, isn't it, really?
Well, no, I'm sorry. No. They were the 3 straight white men in the race, and they all struggled.
So are you saying that there's no racism, no sexism?
I don't think it's playing a part in this Tory leadership election.
I don't think there's any more. There's no more than there is in normal society.
Exactly,
society is full of racist, horrible people. We all know that, but they're not all Tories.
But I'm not.
Is what I would say. You know, this notion. This trope that the Conservative Party is full of racist people is actual nonsense.
And by the way, Tony Sewell, you know, we are not an institutionally racist country, and I think we're also not the Conservative Party is not institutionally racist. Amy, what do you make of this specific line from Lord Ranger, though? Because this is what I have a real problem with. If people reject him, the country, because of this, will be perceived as racist. As Dominic says, that is emotional blackmail.
I think he's talking about on the world stage. Wasn't he talking to an Indian outlet? So I think if you look at it very simplistically, that could be perceived that way. But I don't think... I am not agreeing with this. I'm just saying that it's not totally irrelevant and that it's not to be completely ruled out. I think that all these things do play a part, unfortunately.
But I think most of the people that will perceive this as racist probably have no idea how leadership elections work or really the context of which this has actually come about, because I've spoken to people who were really, really surprised to see so many black and brown people actually putting themselves forward.
Is that?
But then when you actually explain to them what's been going on, the fact that, you know, people like Nadine Zahawi have been in Cabinet, held 2 posts in Cabinet, then obviously more recently Chancellor, Sajid Javid, Kemi Badenoch, all of these people, and Rishi Sunak.
Suella Braverman,
they've all been really obvious possible choices to replace the Prime Minister. So it's not surprising.
Priti Patel gets an awful lot of racist abuse, and most of it is from the left.
But that's OK because she's on the right, isn't it?
And it's OK because she's a Tory, and therefore it's OK to abuse her racially.
Sarah, so we haven't had you on since the leadership contest.
I've been avoiding it.
I was going to say, so is Sunak exciting you? Is Truss exciting you? Can you see any of these?
I don't think either of them. I'll be honest with you, and I'm not trying to be horrid or anything, but I don't think either of them will win a general election. I'm afraid. You know, I think Liz is obviously going to win unless there's some sort of major upheaval, but. You know, and Rishi is probably, you know, he's the more experienced, he's the more, I suppose, you know, he's the sort of good on paper candidate, if you like, but Liz obviously has the heart and she has the passion, and that's what's igniting her supporters, and I think that's really well deserved.
What do you make of the petition, the Lord Cruddas petition, showing this big backlash within the Tory grassroots to the coup against Boris?
Well, I think that's... we've been reporting that in the Mail for a long time. I mean, our readers feel that. They think that basically the MPs have just smashed it up for no good reason at all. I mean, I've spoken to lots of MPs about this, and they all say, you know, well, we felt very strongly that we couldn't condone a sort of sex pest. You know, I mean, I think what it shows is the abyss between the people at grassroots, ordinary voters, and the parliamentary party. And this is always at the heart of all these big schisms in politics and all these big upheavals. It's just the difference between what the MPs think, who live in this Westminster bubble in their world and have all sorts of different priorities, and just ordinary people who think, my goodness me, the man has an 80-seat majority. Have you all gone mad?
No.
Why are you putting yourself through this? Final word, Amy.
No, but come on.
No, but we're talking about Tory Party.
Talking about Tory Party members.
People would perceive... Tory party members, he got an 80-seat majority and then he morphed into this absolute law-breaking debauch.
No, he didn't morph into anything. He was always... No, that's not fair. He wasn't... I mean, he didn't morph into anything. He was always Boris. They elect Boris. He's always been Boris. He's never been... I don't think he's ever pretended to be anything he's not, particularly.
Sarah Vine, Dominic Samuels, Amy Nicole, my superstar panel. They are here all night, but coming up, as it's predicted, 60,000 migrants will cross the Channel illegally this year. Can we trust Fishy Rishi Sunak to stop the small boats landing on Britain's shores? Political firebrand Anne Widdecombe gives her damning verdict at 9:35. But up next, was it wrong for an art trust to use taxpayer money to fund anti-straight white man posters? Political YouTuber Maya Tusi, Corrie actor Charlie Lawson Human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, broadcaster Indy Kerr, and entrepreneur and former apprentice star Joanna Jaju battle it out in a blockbuster clash. I want to know your thoughts on this too. Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews. Our poll running there too. The results straight after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And Whitcomb and Zuby on the way, but time now for the clash. A woke art trust has been accused of racism after it funded a poster demanding straight white men pass the power. The Artichoke Trust bankrolled the controversial installation by the French-born black artist Nadina Ali, which was spotted by Madness of Crowds author Douglas Murray this week. Now, Douglas sparked a Twitter storm when he posted a picture of the provocative image with the caption, "Perfectly normal instructions spotted in Southwark, London. Anyone else spot a backlash coming?" It's since been revealed that the trust behind the stunt has received more than £3 million in taxpayer funding since 2018. So what do you think? Was it wrong for an art trust to use taxpayer money to fund this divisive poster? Let me know your thoughts. Dan at gbnews.uk, at gbnews on social media. The results shortly. But first, to do battle on this, let me bring in political YouTuber Maya Tusi, human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell, broadcaster Indy Kerr, ex-Corrie actor Charlie Lawson, and former Apprentice star Joanna Jaju. So, Charlie Lawson, you're a straight white bloke. Do you feel under attack as a result of this art?
Well, I wouldn't normally be a fan of Mr. Eccleston. He's a little bit too serious for me. But I have to say, I am finding it very difficult being a 62-year-old heterosexual tough guy nowadays. And initially this morning, I was a little bit annoyed and then slightly pissed off. And then I thought, well, this is just a load of nonsense now. Giving taxpayers money to whoever covers a multitude of sins, and we all question where taxpayers' monies go. But I just think this is, I've thought about it, Dan, and I think it's just buck stupid. Let me tell you this. It is very, very. I grew up in Northern Ireland as a white man, a Protestant, blah, 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 all this stuff. Became an actor, and it is the toughest bloody job I have been through in 42 years. I have never had an advantage over anybody at all. So I find it's starting to annoy me the more I get into this debate. And listen, Peter, I have admired you for so many years. You've got balls of steel, mate, and we may not agree, but it's a pleasure to be on the panel with you tonight. And I don't know what you think about it. I think
Peter, let's hear from Peter now. Peter, how do you respond to Charlie? Charlie feels like, actually, lots of white, straight men have huge disadvantages in society today. And by the way, Peter, the facts, actually, if you look at working-class white boys, the other group in society struggling most.
I totally agree. White working-class boys are some of the left behinds, and we need to address that. I think about this particular installation, it was an art installation. It represented a very tiny fragment of the work and expenditure of the Artichoke Trust. I think that what they were trying to do was to provoke a discussion, a debate, to get people talking, and I think that's always a good thing. But I think there is an underlying issue here that overall we do live in a society where not all straight white men, but some straight white men do have disproportionate power and influence. And I think it's good that we question that. And
But it doesn't say some. It doesn't say some, does it?
Well, in a poster like that, you can't be too nuanced. The idea is to be, I think with that poster, is to challenge people, to get them thinking.
Okay,
and I do think it's really about sharing. It's about saying, let's share the influence, let's share the power.
Okay, Narinder Kaur, I'm going to bring Narinder Kaur in now. Narinder Kaur, Douglas Murray, who's written a brilliant article for this week's Spectator magazine about this very subject, said, how would you feel if there was a poster that said, "Oi, black blokes, give us your rights," or "Hey, gays, hand over the cash"? Would that be acceptable, Narinder? And if that's not acceptable, then why is this acceptable?
That's not acceptable because we're a minority. This one is acceptable because of majority. And actually, it's art. I can't understand why middle-aged white men are so triggered by this. Why is it called woke? It's just a discussion. It's art. And it's about time that, this discussion did happen. But why is, is it Paul from Northern Ireland? Why are you so triggered by this? Why are you getting annoyed by this now? Charles, sorry.
Charlie,
why are you so
the legendary
annoyed?
Coronation Street actor, Narinder, my God, you're from that way.
I couldn't see you here. I'm so sorry. I'm so far sorry.
Charlie, how do you respond?
Charlie, why are you so triggered? Why are white middle-aged men? And you said that sentence, I never had any advantage over anyone. You still had advantage over black and brown men. A huge advantage. And you don't know it because obviously you haven't...
OK, we'll let Charlie respond.
Well, first of all, Jesus Christ, darling, you're getting awful triggered yourself, sweetheart. And
yes,
I
am.
To be patronising, but
I am.
Oi, hang on. Oi, let me finish, darling. Listen, you're getting awful angry, baby, all right? Just settle down and let me answer your question.
Oh, don't tell me to settle down.
Oh, for God's sake, wise up. Listen, it's a term of affection where I come from. If you don't like it, tough. Look, listen, I'm saying to you, somebody very interestingly tweeted from a Sheffield housing estate today saying, if he's frigging more advantage than anybody else, then I wish you'd give him some power back. So look, I get this. First of all, this is not art. It's designed to provoke the discussion we're having tonight, and you're the one who's getting very triggered. Okay, so just settle down, okay? The world is changing, right? In the last 3 years, if the rules were reversed and it was a BLM demand or whatever, we have to accept that, right? I'm accepting this. But one thing I will say, it is not art, Peter. In the name of Jesus, that's not art, right?
And isn't the problem, I'm going to bring Joanna Jaju in now. Joanna, look, I'm all for freedom of speech, OK? And I'm all for freedom of artistic expression. The issue that I have with this, Joanna, is that it's partly funded by us. It's partly funded by taxpayers. It is a racist message being partly funded through our money, Joanna. I have a problem with that. Can you understand why?
Not really. I think that if you're going to fund art and if you're going to accept all forms of art, then you should accept this as somebody's expression. I mean, one of the most beloved artists in the UK is Banksy, and he's notorious for making very bold political statements. He's back.
Yeah, but we don't pay for that. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, but the point is that people are acting as if this particular funding is that, the taxpayer has literally said, here's this sum of money, go and make these posters about straight white men. It's not that. It's that the taxpayer has basically funded this big art trust who then has commissioned this particular project. That is the difference. And within that, if we're going to be reflective and respectful of the fact that the UK is a multicultural society, then we also need to be able to allow people to express themselves in different ways.
But Maya Tusi, should we be paying for this sort of thing?
I mean, that's the thing. The reality is not really the problem, the poster itself, or the fact that we've been given this organisation over £1 million because of COVID grants and £500,000 every year. It's not just that. The problem goes deeper than this. It's not necessarily just the actual article. It's actually Arts in England, overall the organisations, all these institutions that we have been funding and giving platform for decades. Since the 60s and 70s, these people, the minority, very proactive minority of anti-Western people, have been infiltrating the system. And they are going out there, spreading their propaganda, and we are essentially not just funding them, but allowing them to become into the system. And that's why it's not just this organization. The whole of the institution needs to go away. It needs to be abolished, as in no longer state-funded. And actually, I will go further and say the culture department shouldn't exist anymore either, because it is absolutely no business that the government has in these areas.
Peter Tatchell, how do you feel about that? I mean, why is the government funding art?
Well, the Arts Council does amazing work, not much publicised, funding local community arts groups, theatre groups and so on. Those are arts initiatives rooted often in deprived communities where there probably are quite a lot of deprived straight white men as well as others. And I think they do great work. I think it's fantastic. Great work, doesn't it? Fantastic that we don't just have the funding for the high art like the English National Opera and the Royal Opera House, but we actually have grassroots community arts organisations funded as well. And that is what most of the work of the Art Show Trust is.
Narinder, what would you say to a young guy who is walking out of a council estate, a young white guy who happens to be straight, walking out of a council estate in Southwark, who sees that poster when he is in one of the most underprivileged groups in British society? What do you say to him?
I'd say that he's still got so many more advantages than a young black boy.
But he doesn't. The statistics back up that he doesn't, Narinder.
No, he still will have way more advantages in life, in society, going forward than the young black man, the young brown man.
Yeah, Joanna, you come in.
He's still miles ahead.
Can I just say that privilege at this point, I think it's really ironic, first of all, that the people who usually call people like me woke and a snowflake are basically offended by something saying pass the power. Privilege is being in a position where you then start to... Privilege is being in a position where you then start to say that, this whole institution shouldn't get funding anymore because of saying pass the power. But you've lived in a situation like...
So, Charlie, you just being a snowflake, Charlie?
And privilege.
No, the woke are being you guys have been snowflakes.
No, that's what I'm saying, Charlie. You just being a snowflake.
Listen, let me tell you something, darling. Let me tell you something. If I was in charge of this bloody government, I'd ban the word offended. You sound to me like one of these people who wakes up in the morning and says, right, what can I be offended by?
No, you can't say that about racism. Okay. It's not that weak. It's too strong. Charlie, you sound racist saying that.
How annoyed you've been. Charlie, you literally said to us, I woke up this morning, I was really annoyed, and then I was actually really pissed off for the whole day. But apparently I'm the person who's offended. I think you kind of showed
I would never use the word offended, darling, because I don't believe in it. Offences
but you were annoyed and pissed off for the whole day.
It's been hijacked by people like you.
People like you? Oh my God, Charlie! Stop while you're ahead.
No, but I'm not offended by this at all.
Charlie, you sound misogynistic as well as racist. I'm sorry to say.
And all you're doing is making yourself look like a buck idiot.
No, I think you are. It's not, Charlie, that's not nice.
It's a free country.
Yeah, Yeah, it is a free country, so we're free to say what we want to say and how we feel in this country.
If it's a free country, Charlie, why are you so pressed over this statement saying pass the power? Is it that provocative?
Well,
are you going?
But Joanna, you would be very.
I grew up in a city where we had graffiti all over the walls, and it was offensive or whatever you want to call it. So it doesn't bother me in the slightest. But don't you think you should just settle down? This is a complete waste of money. It's silly. It's nonsense, and it's doing whatever
Millions have been going from the
taxpayer.
Do you know the issue I have? The issue I have, and Joanna and Narendra, I'll give you the final word to respond to this. But the issue that I have is this sort of art is divisive. It is stoking racial divisions in this country. I don't want it banned, but I don't believe taxpayer money should be going into clearly racist artwork. Final word to you.
That's not clearly racist. It's a fantastic piece. I think more taxpayers' money should be going into more things to make people think about how it is. And actually, I don't think the average white straight man is offended. I actually think that they're OK with this. I think you've had a couple of tweets and it's made a big deal. And I think middle-aged white...
Well, Adam Brooks, who's one of our superstar panellists, he was incredibly offended by it last night. Joanna, final word to you.
But then you need to pick, like, which side of the bed are you going to come out of, every morning? Are you going to say that people are snowflakes and then everybody's, really offended over too much? But then when it's you, and it's actually something really minute, privilege is being in a position where something like this can offend you and you can prompt for it to be banned and not have to be in a position where you're walking out of your council estate, you're having dog poo put in your letterbox like I did when I was growing up. So even if Adam or whoever is called Sheffield grew up in a council estate, and even if they grew up in a position where they were purely working class and struggled, I did, but I had the added layer of the racial abuse, and that's where the privilege comes in.
I know. But the point is, you are saying all straight white men are privileged. The facts do not bear that out. The facts in 2022 UK do not bear that out.
I didn't say all. And also the different forms
this
of privilege.
poster says all. This poster says all.
It's opportunity as well.
Okay.
When it comes to, if I apply for a job and somebody else does, and I've got an ethnic name.
Well, look, fascinating debate. Thank you for having it all. That was the political YouTuber Maya Tusi, the human rights activist Peter Tatchell, broadcaster Narendra Kaur, ex-Corrie actor Charlie Lawson and the former Apprentice star Joanna Jaju. Both sides of the story. Here on GB News, so a spokesman for Artichoke, the organisation behind the poster, said, the artwork in question raises critical and urgent questions about the society we live in. We're not asking that the public should necessarily agree with the statements in any of the artworks, just that they should think and debate the ideas. So who do you agree with? Was it wrong for this art trust to use taxpayer money to fund the divisive poster? Anita says it's racist. Change white for anything else and there would be outrage. David agrees and he writes, I consider it no more than a racist attack. And from Martina on the email, sexual orientation, race and sex are all protected characteristics. Would it be okay if the artist had spent taxpayer money on anti-gay black women posters? Of course not. And your verdict is now in. It's overwhelming. 91% of you agree that it was wrong for the Artichoke Trust to use taxpayer money to fund its anti-straight white man posters. Just 9% of you say it wasn't. Coming up, as the NHS shuts down the controversial Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic after ruling it is, quote, not safe, is this a watershed moment in ensuring gender dysphoric children are protected from extreme treatments? Women's rights campaigner Maya Forstater and Richie Heron, who's suing the NHS over trans surgery he regrets, join me to discuss this issue at 9:45. But first, would the Channel migrant crisis get worse under a Sunak premiership? Former Conservative Minister and political firebrand Anne Widdecombe gives her take straight after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Time now for the latest on the battle to be PM with Anne Widdecombe. One of the biggest challenges facing the next Tory leader is solving the Channel migrant crisis. According to figures from the Home Affairs Select Committee, about 60,000 migrants are expected to cross the Channel in small boats this year, more than double the 2021 total. No-nonsense Truss has vowed to tackle the illegal immigration by potentially leaving the European Convention on Human Rights and strengthening the UK Bill of Rights. Fishy Rishi, however, is reportedly reticent to pull out of the ECHR and has only offered unoriginal and harebrained solutions like housing migrants and cruise ships off the UK coast. And in the last hour, Sunak has laid out his immigration plan at the first official Conservative leadership hustings in Leeds. Watch.
Need to do is change the definition of what counts as asylum, and we should move away from the very expansive ECHR definition, which allows people to claim all sorts of spurious reasons for being here, and move to the tighter definition under something called the Refugee Convention. Secondly, we should make our foreign policy more linked to people taking back failed asylum seekers. If we're going to trade with countries on a preferential basis, if we're going to provide aid to countries, they really should be taking back asylum seekers that we want to make sure are not here anymore.
Former Tory minister and Daily Express columnist Anne Widdecombe joins me now. And you don't think Rishi's bold enough to solve this crisis?
Well, nothing like. I mean, what he actually said was, which didn't come over in that clip, was that we should look to cooperation with the French as the answer. Now, that, as far as I'm concerned, is nothing short of a joke. We have paid the French millions already. They have done virtually nothing. And the idea that we go on trying to solve this problem through cooperating with the French, frankly, is just a non-starter. We have to forget the French. They're not going to help. And therefore, what we need to do is, first of all, to implement the Rwanda policy. There will be no deterrent until the first plane load, a large plane load, a packed plane load, has left for Rwanda. There will be no deterrent until then. And if we have to come out of the ECHR in order to implement that policy, then Liz Truss is right. That is what we should do. And we should lose no time doing it. Now, what Rishi is doing is basically tinkering at the edges. Well, let's redefine asylum seeker. Come on, Rishi, I know. I've been an immigration minister. The definition of an asylum seeker is somebody who is in genuine fear of persecution. That is the definition. It isn't an economic migrant. It isn't somebody who's been in a safe country for years on end who decides he wants to come here. It's somebody who is in imminent danger of persecution. We have a perfectly workable definition. So stop tinkering, Rishi, and just get on with finding a deterrent to the economic migration, which is what it is.
But Anne, doesn't that sum up the entire problem with Rishi's campaign? He is really just tinkering with existing policies that aren't working, trying to look like he's giving a bit of red meat to the Tory base, but we can see through it.
Well, yes. I mean, an obvious one is tax cuts. You know, he's sticking with the current policy, trying to portray that as something very responsible, but in essence, staying with what we've got. There is no boldness in Rishi. I mean, I called him today in my column Rishi-washy. And that is exactly how I feel he's conducting himself. And there's no imagination there. There's no boldness there. There's no buccaneering there. There's absolutely nothing there at all except more of the same, more of the same.
Meanwhile, Anne, Liz Truss seems to be gaining confidence. And I watched her at the Hustings in Leeds earlier tonight, and even some of her critics are saying, actually, she's not so wooden. She's starting to perform. She's connecting with the audience. It feels like she's getting a bit of a glow on as this campaign continues.
Yeah, I think two things are happening. First of all, I think she's received advice and she's listened. And lots of politicians get advice. I'm sure Boris did, but his great failing was he never actually listened. And I think she's probably listened. But the second thing, I think she's gaining natural confidence. And that's just got to be a good thing. And I think that is very much happening as she's gaining in the polls, as she's getting a good reception. She's gaining in confidence. And actually the key to an inspiring performance is to be relaxed, to be utterly convinced of what you're saying. That's the key. It's not to assume a rhetorical style. It's to really mean the thing you're saying. That's starting to come over.
No, I agree. Anything Rishi can do, and because the ballots get sent out on Monday, and you know what Tory members are like, they're usually pretty on it, Anne. They vote immediately. They're not just going to leave it there for a few weeks, are they? Even though they can change their vote, it's highly unlikely most folk will go down that path.
I suspect most of them have already made their mind up what they're going to do. You know, it's like getting postal votes in local elections. You tend to know what you're going to do, so you just do it when the thing comes in. So I think Rishi's got a huge amount of ground to make up. I doubt very much if he can do it. Let me say right away, you know, I'm grateful to him because he was always a Brexiteer. He wasn't a late convert like Liz is. He was always a Brexiteer. And I think he is bright, and I think he is competent, and I think he's got a good future. But he lacks bold ideas, completely lacks them. And what we need in this post-Brexit, post-pandemic world is bold ideas.
Big time. And you've got them. Anne Widdecombe, thank you so much. We'll speak next week, Anne. Yeah. But coming up, do Truss and Sunak need to learn from Boris Johnson's rare miscalculation and ignore eco-zealots pushing for the next PM to adopt an even more extreme green agenda? My superstar panel returns to debate that at 10 in the Media Buzz. The first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages will be revealed then too. But first, after the controversial Tavistock gender identity clinic is branded unsafe for children and shut down, I speak to a campaigner at the heart of this debate, Richie Heron, who's suing the NHS over his gender reassignment surgery. A critically important interview on a watershed moment in the gender wars coming up straight after the break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Breaking tonight, the NHS has announced it is shutting down the Tavistock Centre, the UK's only gender identity clinic for children, after it was found to be rushing under 18s into gender reassignment treatment. A bombshell report revealed the clinic is not safe and that other mental health issues have been, quote, overshadowed once children treated there raised the issue of gender. From next spring, it will be replaced by regional centres at existing children's hospitals that will seek to offer more holistic care and a broader range of doctors. The decision follows the high-profile case of Cara Bell, who, under the care of the Tavistock Centre, was prescribed puberty blockers at the age of 16, but later changed her mind about her decision to transition to male. Cara then became a crucial whistleblower after she pursued a judicial review to stop other kids repeating her mistake. The High Court initially ruled in favour of Cara in the Landmate case, and NHS England immediately declared that under-16s would not receive blockers without a court order, or that decision was overturned in September last year. The closure of Tavistock today means that in the end, Cara really has won in her defence of vulnerable children. Spoke to Cara on the show recently, and having learned from her own harrowing ordeal, she made the case against transitioning full stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I firmly believe that gender dysphoria is a symptom of deeper things going on.
Wow.
I mean, yeah, it's as simple as that, really. I mean, there's no such thing as being born in the wrong body. So, yeah, it's quite shocking to me when I look back, and none of the adults really noticed that or cared.
In a disturbingly similar story, Richie Heron is now suing the NHS over claims he was pressured as an adult into receiving surgery to remove his genitals. Richie no longer identifies as a trans woman, and he firmly believes that the clinics need to be more thorough in their assessments before encouraging life-changing surgeries. And I'm delighted to say that Richie joins me now alongside the Executive Director of Sex Matters, Maya Forstatter. And Richie, I'm going to talk about your story in just a moment. But first, Maya, can you just set up what this decision today actually means? Because it's something that folk like you have been battling for a long time.
Yes, it's good news. This comes after the report of Dr. Hilary Cass, who's a paediatrician who was asked by the NHS to review what's been going on at the Tavistock following all of the whistleblowers. And her research is still ongoing, but she has said it's not safe, and the care that it's giving is not based on sound research. And so what she's called for is for more localised care that focuses on children's mental health and that doesn't just push them onto a pathway to transition. And so it's as a result of her interim findings that they're now closing down the Tavistock and planning to open a series of more local centres where children will be assessed in terms of what's really going on with them, rather than seeing gender as being the only answer.
No, indeed. And Richie, your personal story is utterly harrowing. You are now suing the NHS because you went through the gender reassignment. It's essentially ruined your life, hasn't it? And you don't feel that there were the right checks and balances in place to make sure that you were mentally ready for the huge physical transition that you were put through.
That's right, Dan, and thank you very much for having me on to tell my story. The thing is I actually told them basically everything that was going on, and despite that, I still went through. So to me, it seemed kind of redundant to go through all that, to tell them absolutely everything, to go through this intense process of therapy, and I didn't get caught by the safeguards. And I'm not alone in this, and that's one of the reasons why the Tavistock is closing down. And also, I would imagine that this will be extended to the other gender clinics. But an important point to note is, I feel the move towards the regional centres was something that was going to happen anyway, because they have quite a lot of people to deal with. Now, what we don't want is, we don't want this to just open the doors to anyone. We want to make sure that all the safeguards get put in appropriately, not just for children, but for adults too.
Because the consequences of this surgery, Richie, I mean, it is truly life-saving. I know you've been very open about this, and you now describe the transition as the biggest mistake of your life. I believe you've been left infertile, incontinent, and in ongoing pain as well. So this is going to have massive ramifications.
Yeah, that's right, Dan. And the thing was, is as I was going through the lead up to that process, I had a lot of red flags that weren't addressed. And even taking that to the side, the conversation about the longevity and the procedure itself, how it works, what does it look like when the results are good? What do the results look like when they're bad? None of that happened, and it should have. Now, I'm sure other people who go through this process may have a better level of care, but to me and other people who have had a lot of these similar issues, it doesn't seem to be the standard. It seems to be potluck, and something like this should not be potluck.
And can I just clarify, Richie, you say now that actually post-surgery you've realised that what you were really battling with was your sexuality rather than your gender.
Yeah, and I think I'm not alone in this.
No.
The Tavistock report came out to say that a lot of gay kids were going through the transition process. And obviously I wasn't a child when I went through, I was an adult, but it does impact vulnerable adults too, because the issues that you're faced with, like internalized homophobia as a child, will be there with you when you're an adult. That's not going to go away by itself.
And Maya, this is the huge issue, isn't it? Teenagers, the hormones are running rampant. People are trying to work out what their sexuality is. And lots of kids, lots of teenagers, you know, I've been there, who are thinking, am I gay, am I lesbian, are being pushed into life-changing, horrible surgery.
And yes, and hormones don't just change your body. You know, it's puberty that mature, you know, that's how a child's mind matures. So children are being asked to make a decision which will affect the whole of the rest of their life before their brain is ready to make that kind of decision. And then puberty blockers stops their brain from developing that maturity. That's a really big issue. And the GIDS, the Tavistock started this process of giving hundreds and thousands of children puberty blockers before there was research to show whether it was reversible and what it does to children's minds and their bodies. And it was one of our directors of Sex Matters, Dr. Michael Biggs, who pushed the Tavistock to release that data. They had the data and they weren't releasing it. They were saying, oh yes, this works, it's reversible, this is the answer, when in fact, when they looked at the children they'd been giving this to, the girls were less happy. Their gender dysphoria was not going away. It was not solving the problem, and it was creating the problem.
No, indeed. Well, look, number one, and I don't use this word lightly, both of you are incredibly brave. We want to keep having this discussion with you because there's so much still to unravel. So, Richie Heron, thank you so much for being on the show for the first time. And Maya Forstater, the director of Sex Matters, always a pleasure to speak to you. Of course, we get both sides of the story here on GB News. And regarding Richie's case, in a statement, the Cumbria, Northumberland, Tyne and Wear NHS Foundation Trust said it could not comment on an individual case, but added, Care plans are collaborative and tailored to each patient's needs and goals, and treatment decisions are made following a thorough assessment in line with national recommendations. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as we just heard, the NHS has shuttered the controversial Tavistock gender identity clinic after it was found to have failed vulnerable children in a bombshell report sparked by brave activists like Cara Bell, who says she was pressured into, quote, experimental treatment by specialists who encouraged her to transition.
I'm on the sidelines just like them, really, just waiting for the bigger changes to happen to the point where kids aren't being harmed anymore.
So is this a watershed moment in protecting children from the extreme trans lobby? I'll debate at 10:30 with my superstar panel. Top Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels and author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. We'll discover as well whether tomorrow's newspapers have a take on this turning point in the gender wars next. And also coming up, as Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak face off in their first leadership hustings amid pressure to make tougher climate commitments, should the next PM learn from Boris Johnson's miscalculation and avoid pushing an extreme eco agenda? Don't miss that in just a few minutes. Is the official COVID inquiry asking the wrong questions about our pandemic response? Professor Sunitra Gupta, co-author of the Great Barrington Declaration, is demanding to know why the efficacy of lockdowns is off the table. She's here at 10:20. Do we need to cleanse the country of COVID propaganda? Social media sensation Zuby says Brits need to speak up now. He's uncancelled at 10:40. Keir Starmer is paying the price for failing to subdue Labour's hard left after angering the likes of socialist pipsqueak Owen Jones with his stance on strikes, or lack thereof.
Keir Starmer is a professional political conman.
But he's not the only faction of the Liberal media elite to show a cruel streak. Get a load of Sly News leaving Nadine Dorries and their own cameraman in peril during this scary on-air moment.
I'm afraid we're going to have to go. Now, the government...
You should. Why should I? What are you going to do?
We're going to have to go, Kay, I'm sorry.
Don't touch me then.
Why? The cameraman's in a bit of trouble. I'm going to go.
Oh, anybody.
We'll break down those dramatic viral videos of the day in the media buzz throughout the next hour. Plus, I'll wipe the floor with these horrendous vegan extremists. This made me so mad today, who poured milk all over Harrods and lots of supermarkets too. That's as we crowd the final Greatest Britain and Union Jackass of the week. But before all of that, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. The top story tonight, Conservative leadership candidates Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have both just finished their first of 12 UK hustings from the northern city of Leeds tonight. Both candidates setting out their vision for the future of the country, with Sunak the first to answer questions from Tory party faithful in the audience, saying he wanted to get a grip on immigration as quickly as possible.
What we need to do is change the definition of what counts as asylum, and we should move away from the very expansive ECHR definition, which allows people to claim all sorts of spurious reasons for being here. If we're going to trade with countries on a preferential basis, if we're going to provide aid to countries, they really should be taking back asylum seekers that we want to make sure are not here anymore.
And asked about inheritance tax, Liz Truss said the tax system in Britain needed a complete overhaul.
Look at the overall tax system in the round and make sure it's fair. And my view of fairness is we need to reward people who do the right thing, who work hard, who set up businesses, who earn money and who want to pass it on to their children. So I would look at it again, but I need to look at it in the round.
In other news today, the parents of 12-year-old Archie Battersby have failed to persuade the Supreme Court to stop doctors from ending his life support treatment. They had asked justices to give them more time to carry on their fight for their son, but the request has been refused, with doctors saying Archie is clinically brain dead after he went into a coma in April. His mother says she thinks Archie had been attempting an online challenge when he had a life-changing accident. Unions have announced further rail strikes this Saturday and then again on August the 13th in another dispute over pay. ASLEF says train drivers at 9 companies are due to walk out, and it said strikes are a last resort until their pay is in line with inflation. That's after passengers today faced another day of disruption due to yesterday's strikes. And workers at Britain's biggest and busiest container port have also voted to strike in a dispute over pay. Members of the Unite union, this time backing industrial action at Felixstowe in Suffolk by 9 votes to 1. The union saying an offer of a 5% pay increase is an effective wage cut because of the soaring rate of inflation. And lastly, the actor Bernard Cribbins has died at the age of 93, famous for narrating the children's television series The Wombles back in the day and starring in the film The Railway Children, as well as appearing in Doctor Who and the Carry On films. His career spanned 7 decades. Dame Fluella Benjamin has tweeted he was a creative genius, a great storyteller, and knew just how to communicate with an audience. Bernard Cribbins, who's died today at the age of 93. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. Now it's time for part 2 of Dan Wootton Tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight, now on our Media Buzz. Just one front page for now. It's a feisty one, though. The Daily Star, money-grabbing scumbags, their headline, as they slam the British gas and Shell bosses, raking in record profits while millions face fuel poverty. My superstar panel back with me now. Star Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, political commentator Dominique Samuels, and author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. And breaking tonight, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak have gone head-to-head at the first official Conservative Party hustings of the leadership contest, where, among other pressing issues, they were challenged on their energy policies.
Right, I'm also the Chancellor that you talked about, green energy, created a free port using the freedoms that we had from Brexit to come up with a brand new policy that right now in Teesside is attracting investment and jobs in the industries of the future, in offshore wind, in hydrogen, in carbon capture and storage.
I support fracking in areas where people want it to happen. And I do think it can be part of the solution, as well as releasing more of the North Sea gas reserves. But more of the North Sea gas reserves will be quicker. We also need to do more nuclear power.
Frack, frack, frack. Good on you, Liz. Happy with that. The Hustings clash comes as eco-zealots and the Green Party called on the 2 Tory leader hopefuls to commit the UK to even tougher environmental targets, despite the UK already being on quite a deranged march, actually, to net zero. Using last week's heatwave as justification to push their ruinous green agenda, the party's co-leader Adrian Ramsey took aim at the Conservative government, saying, unfortunately, successive governments have for too long focused on economic growth at all costs, without acknowledging that it's the quality of our economy that matters, not just the quantity. A narrow focus solely on economic growth will exacerbate the climate crisis and worsen social inequalities. And I can't stress this enough. The next Prime Minister must ignore the pressure from the dangerous climate alarmists. I'm an environmentalist, as you all know, but we can't adopt policies that lead to economic oblivion for hard-working folk. Just look at Sri Lanka. Just look at the Netherlands at the moment. Boris Johnson did a lot right as Prime Minister, and you know I'm a big supporter of his legacy, but one miscalculation he made was given in to eco-zealotry led by the likes of Greta. So should the next PM learn from Bojo's mistakes and avoid pushing a disastrous eco-agenda? I know, Dominique Samuels, you have very strong views on this.
Yeah, I mean, the net zero agenda is completely ruinous, and it's being led by global organisations such as the World Economic Forum, which...
They all want us to eat bugs now, but...
Yeah, they all want us to eat bugs. They want us to own nothing and be happy. They want us to stop eating meat altogether. But, of course, it's going to be the people that can afford to eat meat that will be continuing to do it, and it'll be the poor people eating synthetic
just like they'll
stuff
keep taking their private jets to
exactly, they're complete
while we will
hypocrites.
be banned from any air travel anywhere.
And I think we need to be honest about what net zero means for hard-working people. I know people like Amy, like to present this as some cushy dream about saving the planet, but really what it's about is control. It's about controlling people's lives. It's about controlling what they eat. It's about controlling what they drive. It's about controlling how they heat their homes. There's a reason why in Germany they're trying to encourage their citizens to do things like energy rationing. That's what this sort of stuff consists of. And I know your heart is in the right place when it comes to this green stuff. But I know what your opinion's going to be, though. But in reality, it's about controlling people, and the only people that lose out are the ones that can least afford this.
Well, Amy, I will come to you in just a moment. But Sarah, I just wanted to ask you first about Kemi Badenoch, because I know you were very impressed with her campaign. And one of the reasons I was so impressed with her campaign is I feel she was the only Tory leadership contest who was actually honest about net zero.
Yeah,
and she didn't commit 100%. That's the point, because we've got to be careful that we don't destroy our economy.
Yeah, I mean, I thought what Kemi was very good at doing was saying, look, you know, there is no easy solution, there is no happy choice, they're all, you know, least good choices. You know, you've got mad choice A, silly choice B, bad choice, whatever it was she said, which I thought was quite good. And that sort of applied to everything that she was talking about. It's a very pragmatic approach to government. And also not patronising the electorate into saying, you know, we can achieve these incredible, you know, ambitious things, which we actually can't, because as we all know, you know, we're not really the problem when it comes to climate change. It's places like China. And, you know, there's only so much we can do.
Destroy the lives, Amy,
exactly.
of hard-working folk.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it? If you prioritise the economy constantly, then it's at the expense of the planet. That's what you're doing here. And it's really interesting, I think, with conservative ideology. You want to conserve, you want to save all the money, but you want to use up all the resources, all the natural resources.
But we're not doing that. We're less than 1% of carbon emissions.
Yeah,
we are leading the world.
We're doing really well.
I would like to think you would like to lead by example on this stuff. And actually, in the wider electorate, this is really appealing stuff. Like, people put net zero a big priority. So it's very short-sighted. I think that what Liz Truss said
Unless you're a farmer.
What Liz Truss said there is going to appeal to that far-right Tory
How is
MPs.
it far right to want money off your energy bills? That's not far
the
right.
Conservative Party members. To
There's
the
a lot
wider
more
electorate,
people than just
but I think that when you look
that want money off
at
their energy
scrapping
bills.
things like the green levies,
Temporarily
it will do a lot more, and fracking, it will do a lot more damage in the long term than the short term. So it's just a case of not being short-sighted.
But in the long term, we've seen over a decade, this obsession with renewables has actually made our energy unnecessarily more expensive. Countries that actually focus on being more self-sufficient have driven down prices. Meanwhile, we're obsessing over renewables and not actually making sure the people in this country are self-sufficient. It adds about £400.
But it's completely necessary.
Surely
it's
no
only in the last 10
Conservative
years it's been
government.
happening.
Surely no Conservative government, no Conservative Prime Minister, with the energy bills rising to the rates that we expect them to go to. And, you know, Martin Lewis, money saving expert, he's issuing loads of warnings on this at the moment. No Conservative Prime Minister can keep 23% green taxes.
No, you can't. But I mean, what needs to happen is that we need to start looking at alternatives. Micro-nuclear power stations are, you know, something that Liz has talked about, which I think are a very good idea. Fracking also. A lot of the obstacles to us reaching net zero have actually been put there by the environmentalists who won't let us do fracking, who won't let us build the little nuclear power stations that we need to build because they don't want that. There's a difference between people who are concerned about the environment, want to save energy, want to live more efficient lives, and people who just want us all to go back to the horse and cart. And the horse and cart people are the ones, you know, throwing milk around Harrods because they can't bear the fact that someone likes a bit of milk in their tea. And they are the ones who have dominated the debate. They are the absolute sort of extremists. And that's the problem. And I think you're right. I think people are interested in net zero, but they also recognise that Britain has done an awful lot and has set an example.
Let's just wait until it impacts their life in the way that it is making people starve in Sri Lanka because the government decided we're going to ban fertiliser.
What I think that Dominique and yourself are guilty of in this is using the green levies, the green tax, as a scapegoat for the profiteering that is going on within these. Hold up that Daily Star headline again. That's where you want. That's what you want to go in on.
I'm not inconsistent.
That's the problem
on this. I'm not inconsistent on this.
The green levies is small fry in comparison to the profiteering going on, and that's what we should concentrate on.
Do you know what? Everyone likes net zero when it all sounds nice and fuzzy. When all of a sudden we're unable to eat meat, it is going to cost so much money to get any natural produce, when it's going to be impossible to actually pay for the cost of electricity bills. I'm sorry, there is going to be a reaction against net zero in this country.
And more importantly, when you talk about the profits from energy companies, part of what they're enjoying is government money via our taxes for this renewable
by our
factory.
ridiculous subsidies.
That's
of course they want to keep going. Of course that's why they don't want fracking and they don't want nuclear.
Exactly.
Now, Nadine Dorries was forced to cut an interview with Kay Burley short earlier today after the cameraman had an altercation with an aggressive passerby off camera. While Sly News left the feed running, no doubt hoping for a viral moment, what ended up happening didn't actually fit their agenda. The straight-talking culture secretary, who was about to answer a Kay Burley gotcha question about the cost of the Commonwealth Games, proved her lefty haters wrong with a composed and empathetic response. Look.
I'm afraid we're going to have to go now. The government.
You should. Why should I? What are you going to do?
We're going to have to go, Kay. I'm sorry.
Don't touch me then.
Why? You're coming on to the trouble. I'm going to go.
Or anybody. Touch me then. You can't, because I'll have you arrested for assault.
He's not touching you.
He can't touch me, madam. What do you mean he ain't touching me? He can't. I'll have him arrested in 5 seconds flat. Touch me then. Anybody in there touch me, it's assault by beat. One finger.
It's the security.
One finger. Oh, you're a cameraman. Cameraman, touch me if you're bad. One finger, you'll be arrested.
Cameraman did not touch him.
One finger is assault by beating. Touch me then. If anyone touches me, I'm calling the police. But touch me then. You could be God.
You okay?
You could be God, sir. Put one finger on me today and you spend it up. No. Put one finger on me, anybody, and you'll spend the afternoon in the police cell.
Maybe the sneering snobs at Sly News will finally realise Nadine is calm and compassionate, as proven in that moment, unlike them, given they left it rolling. Amy Nicole, Dominique Samuels, Sarah Vine do stand by, because coming up, as the controversial Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic is branded unsafe and closed down by the NHS, is the fight back against the extreme trans lobby succeeding. My superstar panel is very divided on this issue, and I'm going to return to debate that. But first is the official COVID inquiry asking the wrong questions about our pandemic response. Professor Sunita Gupta, co-author of the Great Barrington Declaration, is demanding to know why the efficacy of lockdowns seems to be off the table. She's here live next.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you. We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Welcome back. More of tomorrow's newspaper front pages coming up. But first, the quest for answers over COVID-19 has finally begun. The first phase of a government-ordered inquiry launched last week with the aim of determining whether the UK was adequately prepared for a pandemic. Here's the chair, Baroness Heather Hallett, giving her opening statement.
Although life is beginning at last to return to normal, the pandemic is still with us, and there are many who are still suffering. Those who have suffered the most want to know if anything could have been done to prevent or reduce their suffering, and that is why this inquiry has been established.
While the inquiry's first witnesses won't be called until next spring, my esteemed guest tonight fears the whole investigation could be botched if critical key questions are not asked. Sunitra Gupta, a professor of theoretical epidemiology at the University of Oxford and co-author of the Great Barrington Declaration, says the most important issue to probe is not whether the government acted at the right time, but if draconian lockdowns that ravaged our economy and sparked a national mental health crisis and a health crisis too were justified at all. Now she's worried the establishment will close the book on COVID without any critical analysis of this hugely damaging concept. I'm delighted to say that Professor Gupta joins me now. And Professor, I am so concerned about where this inquiry seems to be headed. It seems to be asking that really narrow question about, if we'd locked down 2 weeks earlier in March 2020, would none of this have happened? I mean, is that what you're feeling?
No, I mean, yes, I'm aligned with you in being very worried about this, because, of course, that is a common tactic, isn't it? When, you face this very complicated question, and instead of answering, slicing right down to the middle, you start to answer ancillary questions, some of which make no sense. So, often when you're confronted with a bully, they will, instead of addressing the issue at hand, they'll say, well, actually, this is what could have happened, or you could have washed those dishes earlier. And, it's really very problematic when you have a situation where you're not confident that the general purpose of this inquiry is really to slice down to the actual matter of it. And it's interesting what the clip that you just showed, the people who suffered most. Who were the people who suffered most? That's what we need to first think about. And we know now, we really do know now, there are reasons to excuse people for maybe not knowing 2.5 years ago, but really there are no excuses anymore.
Well,
to not know that the children suffered most, that the poor suffered most, that this disadvantaged bore the brunt of this. And so if that's who suffered most, then we should try and understand why they suffered most. And we also know now that lockdowns did very little to prevent the spread of infection. And even if they had been successful in that material aim, that it did not necessarily achieve anything in the, slowing the spread of infection is not really a sensible way to tackle a respiratory pandemic of this ilk.
And one of the things, though, I think we're battling, Professor Gupta, is that it has just been so widely accepted in the establishment and in the mainstream media that lockdowns work. When I have conversations with folk who operate and exist in those circles, and I try to explain to them, do you not understand? Lockdowns are not proven to have worked for all of the reasons that you've just explained. They literally look at me as if I'm crazy.
Well, this was the big problem, is that, the biggest uncertainty, there were uncertainties concerning how the pandemic would spread, what the virus actually was composed of, its biologic properties. But the biggest uncertainty was whether lockdowns or any of these interventions would stop its spread. But there was no uncertainty as to whether these interventions would cause enormous distress. No. And so there was this very peculiar inversion of, certainty and uncertainty in going forwards. What we know now with some certainty is that lockdowns do very little to
stop the spread that we were constantly told they would do.
Or to materially stop the spread in any way that actually reduces the harm caused.
Well, yes, and then also, what about the health consequences of lockdowns? I mean, Sarah Vine, who's on our panel tonight, heard you were coming on and said, well, you've got to ask, what about all of the cases of hepatitis now in children that seem to be linked to the lockdowns?
Well, that is something many of us warned about right at the outset, which is that when you institute these lockdowns, what you're doing is you're knocking on the head those viruses, those pathogens, which are endemic, because they're sort of at equilibrium. And if you suddenly bring in lockdown, they might transiently disappear from the circulation, whereas you do almost nothing to halt the spread of epidemic viruses, which are starting off in a situation where most people are non-immune anyway. So what you're doing is you're doing nothing to stop the spread of the pandemic, and you are knocking out these other endemic viruses with which we live, I wouldn't say happily, but, we tolerate their presence. And typically you get them when you're younger, and you don't suffer the consequences that you would suffer if they were suppressed and then suddenly came back all in one rush, as they're doing now. And the hepatitis cases are possibly, one doesn't want to be too strong in emphasizing this, but, this is what we call a perverse consequence of intervening, where you increase the average age at which someone gets an infection, which itself could be damaging, but you also suddenly have this sudden sort of onrush of all these pathogens that have been suppressed transiently, and so you get these co-infections. And some rather very elegant studies now are showing how those co-infections could have led to these really awful instances of children needing liver transplants. It's just heartbreaking.
It is. Heartbreaking is the word, and you have been a leading light over the past 2.5 years now, so please keep fighting the good fight, and we will speak soon. That is Professor Sunak Gupta, a Professor of Theoretical Epidemiology at the University of Oxford. We're going to keep on this inquiry because it's really important that this inquiry honestly looks at not just what happened with COVID, but what happened with lockdowns too. So on this show, we've got our own lockdown inquiry, plus we're going to be keeping the COVID inquiry honest. But coming up, why is the establishment dragging its feet over cleansing Britain of COVID propaganda? Social media sensation Zuby says we need to speak up now. He's uncancelled at 10:40. But next, the NHS has shuttered the controversial Tavistock gender identity clinic after it was found to have failed vulnerable children in a bombshell report. So is this a sign that the fight back against this extreme trans lobby is succeeding? My superstar panel return to debate that next, and we'll see if it's made any of tomorrow's newspaper front pages too. See you soon.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go? Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now on our Media Buzz. More front pages are in, and The Independent leads with the outrage sparked by the soaring profits of energy firms. Shell and Total posted record earnings the day after experts warned average bills could hit £3,800 a year. The Daily Express splashes on Rishi Sunak's pledge to double the number of foreign criminals deported if he becomes Prime Minister. He wants to halve the length of prison time required to trigger automatic deportation to 6 months. The Guardian quotes Francis O'Grady, the General Secretary of the TUC, as saying the eye-watering profits of energy firms insults working people. Annual energy bills could hit £3,850 from January. My superstar panel return now. Star Daily Mail columnist Sarah Vine, political commentator Dominique Samuels, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicol. And breaking tonight, Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, has declared his support for Liz Truss in the battle to be Prime Minister. In a huge boost for Team Truss, the very popular Cabinet Minister exclusively told The Sun newspaper that the Foreign Secretary is, quote, authentic, honest and experienced with the integrity for the top job. What's most fascinating, though, is Wallace also attacked her rival Sunak for abandoning his post in Cabinet and throwing the government into chaos. And Sarah Vine, this is a really significant endorsement,
it is,
even more than Priti Patel.
Yeah.
This was the Cabinet Minister that both the leadership contenders wanted. He would have had a strong chance of winning himself. He was in the race. And he's really gone for Rishi Sunak. I've just read the interview by Harry Cole, and he says, look, what happened if the markets collapsed the day that the Chancellor quit? I'm the Defence Secretary. We're in a battle with Ukraine. I couldn't just quit.
Yes, I mean, Liz has obviously got all her ducks in a row. This is going to happen now. There's going to be very carefully orchestrated support coming out for her. But don't forget that on Monday, I think it's Monday, that the ballots go out. And this is quite significant because, of course, Rishi was hoping to spend the summer persuading the membership that he was the guy for the job. But that's not going to happen because what's going to happen is they're going to get their ballots Monday, Tuesday, and most of them will just
vote immediately.
Vote by return of post, and they'll probably vote for Liz. And, of course, this Ben Wallace will sort of, really reinforce that notion.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting, Dominic, to see if Priti Patel declares over the weekend, because it's the other thing now. People can see the writing on the wall. They can see there's going to be a Truss Prime Ministership. Someone like Priti wants to be in the cabinet.
And also there'll be a sort of lemming effect, because, as you say, they want jobs, and they're sort of going to be jostling for that.
Naturally.
Now, as we discussed earlier in the show, the Tavistock clinic has been shut down following a bombshell NHS report that branded the clinic unsafe for children. Delighted at the outcome, former Equalities Minister and one-time Tory leadership contender Kemi Badenoch tweeted, "I can't state enough how profound this decision is. There's lots I can say now. I'm no longer Equalities Minister, like the personal testimonies heard of destroyed childhoods, having to protect whistleblowing clinicians from endless harassment by Twitter activists, the battles fought to get the review going, the smearing of women who had serious concerns as TERFs and bigots, and how this links to wider problems such as the credulity of some MPs who allow policy making to be subverted by groups such as Stonewall." While the front-runner of the leadership race, Liz Truss, also tackled the issue of gender ideology and its impact on our children head-on, as she and Rishi Sunak were grilled at the first Hustings in Leeds tonight. Look.
First of all, I do not believe that under 18s should be able to make irreversible decisions about their own bodies that they might come to regret later. So I think it's very important to note that. And of course, schools should be sensitive. They can provide additional facilities, but it should not be at the expense of protecting young girls.
From next spring, Tavistock will be replaced by regional centres at existing children's hospital that will seek to offer more holistic care and a broader range of doctors. But even with testimony like that from Cara Bell, which we saw earlier in the show, extreme trans lobbyists are railing against the clinic's closure. So, Sarah Vine, has the NHS done the right thing by closing the...
Not a moment too soon. They should have closed it a long time ago. I mean, the Cass report is really devastating, and it's, you know, it's not just that there are lots of people who feel that they're like Cara Bell, who feel that they have been sort of led in the wrong direction. It's just that what they're doing is, it's all about ideology. It doesn't seem to be about the people involved. It's all about this is our ideology, we're going to pursue it, and these children are, you know, sort of swept up in that. And the thing is, nobody is ever going to say that somebody who is trans should have to live in the wrong body. But there are huge questions about age and responsibility and, you know, at what stage you allow people to make irreversible changes to their physical being.
And we heard from the guest earlier in the
some of which will leave you, and some of which will leave you infertile, or you'll have to be on drugs for your whole life. I mean, not just these are really long-term, you know, decisions that these people are having to make. And a lot of the attacks on people like J.K. Rowling and anyone who's ever dared to question this dogma have been so incredibly vicious. And it's nice now to see that the NHS, well, to see that the tide is slightly turning and we're coming back to a position where we're trying to be very sympathetic, but we're also trying to be responsible about this.
Yeah, well, your newspaper, the Daily Mail, has done a rare front-page comment on this tomorrow, where it says, in years to come, we will surely look back and wonder how this was ever allowed to happen at all. But if there is one lesson to be learned, let it be this: we must never let the rantings of a fringe minority silence free speech, reason and medical evidence.
I mean, one of the really key sticking points on all of this is conversion therapy. You know that there's been this whole big argument about whether parents should question their child's desire to change their sex, or whether doctors could do it, or whether professionals generally can do it. And, you know, the Tavistock and Stonewall and these very quite, you know, have always been against that. So if you're a parent and your child says, you know, you've got a girl and they want to be a boy, you can't say, are you sure? You know, shall we talk about this? Shall we explore this? Shall we make sure?
I think that's the thing that nobody really likes to talk about. And I think that's because this whole thing is ideologically driven. A lot of the time when children express that they feel as though they're in the wrong body or they want to be another sex, there are mental health issues that should be explored and addressed before any permanent decisions are made. The Washington Post did a really interesting story on this, where one parent spoke of how their 13-year-old daughter, Patricia, expressed that they, you know, wanted to be transgender. This was actually after they'd been sexually assaulted by an older girl. She was taken to the therapist. The therapist said, no, we need to affirm her identity. But then when she was taken to a different therapist, it emerged actually why she wanted to change her sex. And then shortly after those issues were addressed, she no longer felt as though she was transgender.
And Richie Herron, who was on the show earlier tonight, essentially realised he was a gay man. And it was just this repressed sexuality. And the moment he went through the surgery, and by the way, you know, the medical issues he's going to have now for the rest of his life, they've removed his genitals. He, you know, and he realised it was a mistake. Now, Amy, I know you strongly disagree and you think the Tavistock Clinic should have kept going.
The Tavistock Clinic was littered with problems. The Cass report demonstrated that. However, don't tar the brush of a problematic clinic. Don't attach that immediately to the therapies they offered. The therapies they offered are vital, and the conversation about we're going to help trans kids more by opening these remote facilities is probably not going to happen. And until the government take it seriously and ban conversion therapy, that tortures
is it conversion therapy,
trans
though?
kids and
There's no such thing as a trans kid, Amy.
acknowledges that children experiencing gender dysphoria need to be taken seriously, and in some cases deserve to have the health care which could involve puberty.
But it's not conversion. It's not
healthcare.
conversion therapy to say to someone who is aged 8, because these are the ages we're talking about, you know, who says I would like to. It's not conversion therapy to say, let's just wait and see how you feel in 5 years. No, that's what they would consider to be conversion therapy. They would consider that to be an abuse of a trans child because you're not allowing them to affirm their identity. Now, the thing is, they may well be trans. I'm not saying that they're not. But the point is that before you start rewiring your plumbing, to put it politely, you need to be sure, because there's no going back.
There are hundreds that are not. We know there are hundreds that are not. But I think the fundamental ideological difference here is Dominique says there's no such thing as trans kids, and you obviously think there are.
That's absolutely a ridiculous thing to say, Dominique.
I don't think there is any such thing as a trans kid.
It's actually really quite offensive as well.
I don't think it's offensive. I think it's the truth. I think there is such thing as a child with gender dysphoria. But to say there is such thing as transgender children, I think is child abuse and is extremely misleading. If that child then decides when they grow up they want to act upon that gender dysphoria, which is a mental condition, by undergoing treatment
which time it's too late, and then they look too masculine and they're ousted by society. And you say they're too masculine, they do this. You need to catch this early, but it is a very minority of people. Can I just say about detransitioners? Detransitioners make up 1% of those who start on this road to therapy. Therapy helps many more.
A large proportion of detransitioners, one of the main reasons, one of the main problems that they identify is their underlying issues not actually being explored.
So they're still unhappy.
Well, that's what actually Heron said, and it's so disturbing to read his testimony. He had 2 counselling sessions, right, about half an hour each. And what was most shocking is he was basically worried that if he didn't go through with the surgical procedure, they were going to take away his free counselling. So there's a real push, like there is in loads of parts of the NHS, go on antidepressants.
Well, they're very vulnerable, these people. They're naturally vulnerable people. On the issue of children, as in, you know, underage, people who have not gone through puberty, I've had 2 children, and I would say that most children are pretty gender fluid, naturally. You know, one day they want to be a girl, the next day they want to be a boy, then they want to be a cat or an elephant or whatever.
But we're not talking about
But what I'm saying is that I don't think it's until they get to puberty that they really start to sort of...
But even at puberty, the hormones...
Can I say one
final
last
word,
thing on
Amy,
this?
yes.
My final word is that these therapies are backed by the British Medical Journal and the British Psychological Society. These are not...
By therapies, what do you mean, like, specifically?
Hormone blockers.
Right, hormone blockers that have life-changing effects, like bone thinning.
Side effect.
They're
Potential side effects.
But these are things that are lifelong. One woman...
Do you know what's lifelong? Being told to hate yourself and that you don't exist. Which is what you're saying.
That's not what anyone's saying. That's not what anyone's saying. What I'm saying is gender dysphoria is a mental condition, and that's factual, and that instead of encouraging children to... inject themselves with life-changing hormones.
It's making it accessible when necessary.
Issues should be explored first.
It's just making it available when it's necessary and admitting that there are merits to these therapies and not just completely ruling them.
But going back to the initial thing, the Tavistock Clinic was an ideologically driven medical facility.
And if you listen to the testimony of Carabelle, she felt pushed into this. She was given the treatment at 16 years old. It has physically destroyed her.
And there is a reason why the number of trans children that we're seeing is skyrocketing, and it's not because they're all of a sudden having this great awakening, it's because it's being popularised and actually pushed culturally.
I mean, if you look at TikTok, it's absolutely full of people glamorising what they call top surgery and all of this kind of stuff, and children are very susceptible.
Now, the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust said today its staff had worked tirelessly and under intense scrutiny in a difficult climate. However, they acknowledge the level of care required cannot and should not be met by a single highly specialist national service, and the necessity for children to, quote, access care and support in a timely fashion within a joined-up system. Well, Hal is well and truly frozen over because I'm about to say something I never thought I'd say, actually. I agree with Owen Jones. But stick with me here, because it's the utter incompetence of Keir Starmer that has united us. In a blistering Twitter tirade sparked by the Labour leader's stance on strikes or lack thereof, the socialist pipsqueak called out Slippery Starmer for being an empty vessel with no actual guiding philosophy apart from an overwhelming lust for power. Watch.
Keir Starmer is a professional political conman. Don't use those words lightly. In order to become leader of the Labour Party, he made a series of solemn commitments, pledges, he called them, which were radical domestic policies and party unity. He has brazenly, overtly delivered the exact opposite. I know his army of supporters online, the most tedious, ridiculous Waitrose customers that you will ever come across. They think it's all fine because they don't believe in anything. They made their entire political identity Brexit and stopping Brexit for years. He is somebody who lies as a matter of course in order to secure power. He's not fit to be leader of the Labour Party and he's not fit to be Prime Minister of the country.
I mean, look, he did lie. He completely lied during the campaign. And this is disastrous for Labour because it shows just how bitterly divided the left in this country is, even when they're closer to governing than they have been in years, thanks to a smear campaign against Boris Johnson. They still can't resist tearing themselves apart. However, as usual, champagne communist Owen took things one step too far by calling on his 1 million followers to set upon Starmer if they see him out in public. In a now-deleted tweet, the ghoulish Guardian griper wrote, "If you see Keir Starmer out and about, call him what he is, a con man and a liar, and film it. Enough of letting our politicians get away with this grotesque levels of dishonesty." Owen, think about it. You've been assaulted in public before. You, more than anyone, should realise how stupidly irresponsible that statement was. Shame on you. And with that, normal service is resumed. Sarah Vine, Dominic Samuels, Amy Nicole, thank you so much. But do stand by because coming up, my superstar panel are going to nominate for tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But first, is it time to cleanse the country of COVID propaganda? Rapper, author and podcast host Zuby wants to know why the establishment is dragging its feet on this and says we all need to speak up. He's uncancelled next. First, though, quick look on a really exciting show Monday.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, after the NHS shutters the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic for failing vulnerable children. Cara Bell, who blew the whistle on their controversial practices after they encouraged her to undergo a transition she later regretted, speaks out after winning her battle against trans extremism. Why is there a mad push to get the world eating insects? The State of Fair author Laura Dodsworth tries to make sense of this latest assault in the war on meat. Plus, there's opinion galore from Brendan O'Neill and my superstar panel, former MEP and father of the outgoing PM Stanley Johnson, Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, and senior reporter at the iNewspaper Benjamin Butterworth. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And with COVID hysteria still prevalent in some pockets of the country, a vigilante movement to rid our streets and buildings of pandemic propaganda is gaining fierce momentum. Ordinary members of the public, fed up with seeing old signs and posters demanding we mask up and stay away from each other, are taking it upon themselves to tear them down. One of Britain's top businessmen, Luke Johnson, took aim at Transport for London with this tweet last week, demanding to know why the, quote, neurotic bullies were still showing the threatening out-of-date orders to muzzle faces with bacteria-ridden face nappies. Meanwhile, rapper, author and social media star Zuby has also been getting in on ridding the world of authoritarian COVID messaging, revealing, "I've started quietly taking down COVID-19 poster ads in hotels, gyms, elevators, etc. Yes, they are ads, and they will stay up forever unless we take it upon ourselves to remove them. Most gyms, shops, hotels, restaurants, schools and public areas still have these dumb social distancing and wear a mask posters up everywhere. We don't need constant and permanent reminders of this nonsense. Most of them have been outdated or have incorrect information on them anyway, so it's akin to removing litter." Zuby, I mean, these sinister signs were designed to nudge people's behaviour, and by leaving them up, folk are being denied the chance to move on, really, not to mention the fact they're an eyesore. So why is the establishment dragging its feet over cleansing us of this COVID propaganda?
I'll be honest, Dan, I think that the majority of people have just forgotten. I think the entire thing went on for such a long period of time that people who work in shops and hotels and gyms and other public areas, I think no one's told them to take them down. And I think that people have just gotten so used to seeing them over the course of the past 2.5 years. And perhaps other people just think that, oh, well, someone else is going to do it. Someone else is going to take it down. But I think that they should be brought down because we don't need permanent reminders for the rest of our lives about this incident. And the information is totally out of date. I would argue much of it never made sense anyway.
No, it never made sense.
Yeah,
none of it made sense
anymore.
But Zubi, what I love about your campaign is it has gone truly international. You've had tens of thousands of people all around the world doing this. And seriously, I think this has to become a movement. And what really fascinated me is you said in all of the responses you've got, you reckon only about 1% of people actually want the posters to remain in place.
Yeah, most people want to get rid of this. Most people have moved on, and most people want to move on. Of course, there's a tiny, tiny percentage of people who, for whatever reason it is, we could have a deep psychological analysis of this, but they don't want to move on. They've quite enjoyed having all of these restrictions and going around and being authoritarian and telling other people what to do, where to stand, what direction to walk in, what to wear, cover your face, do this, do that. And I think a lot of people have tripped off that power and they don't really want it to end. And I think some people are just very, very neurotic, and it's not enough for them to behave how they want to behave. And they still want to constantly remind, if not force, other people about this. But it's been time to move on for a long time. And I think we should get rid of the remainder of these.
Subi, can I just ask quickly, what do you do, though, if, like, the gym manager is standing over there, or there's, like, someone in the hotel elevator? Do you talk to them and do you explain what you're doing? Or are you just like, boom, it's coming down?
For me personally, I've just been quietly doing it. I mean, I normally go to the gym when barely anyone is there, and I go to lots of different gyms. And if I'm there and I'm on a treadmill or I'm doing my weights and I see a sign in front of me, blue tacked to the mirror saying, stand 6 feet apart or wear a mask or whatever, I just take it upon myself to take it down, just like I'd clean up litter.
No, Zubi, I'm going to join you now. I promise you I'm joining you on this. Rapper, author, host of the Real Talk with Zubi podcast. Thank you so much. But it's time now to reveal tonight's greatest Briton in Union Jackass. My superstar panel return now. Sarah Vine, who's your greatest Briton?
Kemi Badenoch.
Just for a brilliant campaign.
Just for a brilliant, and also for saying that thing about the Tavistock today.
No, of course, she was very good, wasn't she? Dominique Samuels, your greatest Briton?
Mine is barrister Alison Bailey for securing a win for women across the country when an employment tribunal found that her chambers had discriminated against her for upholding a complaint put forward by Stonewall.
Good on her. And Amy Nicole, your nominee?
I've just forgotten.
Martin Lewis, we spoke about him earlier.
Because I was going to say something about that. Martin Lewis, because he's urging that Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak take the cost of living crisis seriously and start urgently looking at solutions that we really desperately need.
OK, well, I am going to go with Sarah, actually, and Kemi Badenoch, because I really thought that tweet about the Tavistock clinic today was fascinating. She knows a lot about this, and there's a lot more to emerge. Sarah Vine, what about your Union Jackass nomination?
Well, I love her, but it was Emma Barnett this week, because the idea that you would change the name of the Lionesses to the Lions is just a bit silly, really.
Yes, so also, I think that was discussed on Women's Hour.
Yeah.
You asked the question.
Well, I know she seemed. No, she did seem to think. I mean, I think
it's such a stupid question; it shouldn't even be asked.
Lionesses sound much better than lions, anyway.
Yeah.
Well, everyone knows that the lions just sit around doing nothing all day.
Gendered language. Yeah. What are we doing to ourselves?
Love gendered language.
And it's women's football, and lionesses are women lions, so that's obviously what it should be.
It's an amazing name that we've all embraced, and good luck to the lionesses on Sunday. Dominique, your Union Jackass.
My Union Jackass is the vegan protesters.
Oh, my God.
Making a fool of themselves, pouring milk on the floor in Harrods. I think they need a burger more than anything else.
These goons have made me so furious all day. Look at them for drinking milk. Pathetic people. Genuinely, I want them locked up. I'm not even joking. All of them should be in jail. It is criminal damage. Amy Nicole, your Union Jackass nominee.
People who should be in prison. Shell and Centrica bosses for recording absolutely massive profits.
So what have they done that's
9
illegal?
billion
Sorry, what have they done that's illegal? Make money.
Profiteering. Well,
But
you
you just
tell me
said you
that when
wanted
you
them in
get your
jail.
energy bill in this autumn. Actually, it'll be fine for you because you're loaded. But audience, yours won't be.
Amy Nicole. Well, look, I'm clearly going for the animal rebellion. Lock them up. Honestly, lock these criminals up. I am done with them. Amy Nicole, Dominic Samuels, Sarah Vine, thank you for being my last fabulous superstar panel of the week. But, of course, I am back Monday from 9 p.m. Headliners is next, so have an amazing weekend. Good night.
Hello there, my name's Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast. It is looking mostly dry over the next 24 hours or so across the UK. There will be some showers and it stays on the warm side for many of us. High pressure just about holding on for the next 24 hours. However, as we move into the weekend, that slips away. It allows weather systems to move in from the Atlantic, bringing outbreaks of rain and stronger winds to some of us as well. For the rest of Thursday evening, though, a quiet end to the day. 1 or 2 heavy showers, though, still possible across parts of Dumfries and Galloway up into the Borders region. These continuing into the early hours. But for most, a dry night, some clear spells as well. And temperatures on the mild side, 11 to 16 Celsius. So a warm start to Friday morning, the best of the sunshine first thing across central southern parts of England and Wales. Cloudy across the Pennines up into the Borders region, some outbreaks of rain here. Plenty of sunshine initially across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Through to the afternoon, many places dry with plenty of sunny spells, though a few showers are possible across Northern England, Wales, the Midlands in particular. Temperatures ranging from the low to mid-20s, highs of 26 or 27 towards the London area, so feeling warm in that sunshine. Showers through